it seems to be an easy verse just to get by with whatever you want to get by with. And that's how we use it. I've been in class and I've said things and they say, well, it says judge not lest you be judged. Well, what does that mean? It's interesting. What does that mean? What do you think it means?
I think you're supposed to judge. I think it means to judge yourself first. Not necessarily to not judge.
Okay, so you're saying that it's not a universal do not judge.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I see a flaw in you, not the first thing I need to do rather than go to you and tell you about your flaw is look at me and recognize that flaw myself.
Okay, that's good for 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. Anybody disagree or add to? Let's look at some. Somebody look at Galatians 6:1.
6:1.
Yeah, Galatians 6:1. Somebody else look at 1 John 4:1. I mean, we can all turn to those if you want to, but they're just one verse. But I want us to look at them.
I don't really
Okay.
see how we're supposed to separate 1 and 2. Like, I don't see verse 1 as a standalone decree. It's got to be paired with 2 all the time.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I think the first 5 verses really go together. But I agree with you on 1 and 2. We always quote 1, don't we?
Yeah, like instead of a period after judge in 1, if we saw it with a comma there, it would flow.
Oh, instead of a period. Yeah.
The way I see it.
Okay. Good point. I like that. Okay, I agree with you. Has anybody got Galatians 6:1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brethren, if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, so that you too will not be tempted.
Does that have anything to do, you think, with a person judging? So with that, is that a contradiction of what we just read in Matthew 7:1 and 2? If it's not a contradiction, then is there something that we misinterpret if we say it is?
I think the motives are different in the 2 instances.
Okay.
In Matthew 7, he's saying, don't judge just to show that they're wrong. Where in Galatians 6, he's saying, restore them, bring them back to where they need to be. Don't do it to show them that they're wrong and that you're better than them, but to show them and help them. So your motives have to be pure, I think, in both situations.
Yes, I agree. They have to be pure in both situations. Exactly. And as we've talked about, that's what the Sermon on the Mount's all about. Heart condition, talking about the kingdom. Okay. And and it compares the law to the heart, and the motives that the Jews and the rabbis took in expanding the law to mean things that it didn't mean. Jesus now brings us back to reality. Okay. That God has always been a moral God. Morality has remained the same. And so I agree. Somebody was going to say something else. I don't remember who had their hand up. Okay, I agree with what you just said. So there's got to be judging, though, or we couldn't restore someone if there wasn't some way of saying he or she has done something wrong. You don't go to restore someone if they haven't done anything wrong, right? So somebody read 1 John 4:1.
Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world.
How do we test? Judging. So is that a contradiction of Matthew 7:1? It's not. Then evidently the way it's used normally is evidently not the proper way to use it. Let's turn to John 7. Hold your place there. We're coming right back to it. I want everybody to look at John 7. There's just one verse there. Somebody read verse 24. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the 7th chapter. I just want to look at one verse.
Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly.
Okay. What else is that's good. I like
New American Standard says, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous.
Okay, I like the righteous judgment. Correctly is fine. I like the righteous judgment, which means what? What does that verse say? Does that verse contradict Matthew 7? It adds to it. It kind of clarifies it. Jesus wouldn't say to judge and then not judge in somewhere else. Okay? We need to understand what he's saying in Matthew 7. Okay? And Kelsey was bringing it out, the heart, the attitude of the way we do it. Now, I want us to look at something else. Let's just turn to it again. Let's look at Romans 2. Let's hold your place there. So I'll look at Romans 2. That's interesting. When it comes to the heart and when it comes to what Chuck said, 1 through 3. Somebody read Romans 2, 1 through 3.
Therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges. For in passing judgment on another you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things. We know that the judgment of God rightly falls on those who practice such things. Do you suppose, O man, you who judge those who practice such things and yet do them yourself, that you will escape the judgment of God?
Wow. All of us know, I think by now at least, that Romans, the first 3 chapters, talks about the Gentiles, the Jews, and then all of us. Okay. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. Okay. And in 2, what is he saying in these 3 chapters? What are they doing? What have the Jews been doing? It's interesting. You don't have any excuse. Any excuse for what? Every one of you who what?
They've been looking down on the Gentiles.
Yeah.
They really had their nose up, because they don't adhere to any of the old laws that somehow this new Christianity.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a judgment of the new law or old law. It was a judgment of what? Unbelievers call Gentiles, they were called dogs, were they not? By the Jews, not by God. Okay. And what were they doing? We have a little bit of this, right? I'm so much better than you. Look what you are. Look who you are. And what does God say here to them? If you pass judgment and you're doing what? The same thing. Yeah, judging, but the same thing. Exactly. And that's what he talks about in 7 of hypocrisy of ourselves. Okay? It's interesting is that, hey, you're without excuse. Because if you pass judgment on the very things that you're doing and saying they're wrong, he said, you got problems. You got serious problems. I think, all right, then I want to turn to another verse, and then we can get into a little more discussion. While you're in Romans, turn to 14, chapter 14. Because I'm trying to encompass the whole idea here. There's other verses we can use. All right, 1 through 4. Somebody read 14, 1 through 4 for me.
Now accept the one who is weak in faith, but not for the purpose of passing judgment on his opinions. One person has faith that he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats vegetables only. The one who eats is not to regard with contempt the one who does not eat, and the one who does not eat is not to judge the one who eats, for God has accepted him. Who are you to judge the servant of another? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand for the Lord. For the Lord is able to make him stand.
Okay, we can read a little bit further, but to understand the weak, but the weak here is not one who is not a Christian that he's talking about, okay? But when we first become Christians, what happens? Do we know everything? I really like sitting at the feet of any, what I would consider men of great knowledge or scholars, we may even call them, or whatever, because they know, most of them know Hebrew, Greek. Not that you have to know it to understand the Bible. That's not what I'm saying. But I mean, they have studied and studied and studied, and they know what the words are and what they mean. And they talk to you with knowledge. But my point is that even if they're my age and they've studied all their life, some study 6 to 8 hours a day, all their life, they still don't consider themselves, it's kind of like Paul, you know, I have not yet apprehended it all, okay? So weak is, but what is he talking about weak? What do you think he's talking about here? What was just read by Kelsey? What is it that they were weak in this case? Their faith. And they hadn't fully realized what? In this case, what? About eating certain things, correct? They had a little problem about eating some meat, especially if they thought it was to idols. All right. What does he say about that? You know, I'm not a vegetarian, and I know there's quite a few. I don't know if anybody in here is. It doesn't matter to me. But I know you hear a lot more people at least come on TV saying they're vegetarians. And I couldn't be a vegetarian. My body is conditioned to not good food. So I don't have that much longer for it to readjust. So I couldn't be a vegetarian. But is there anything wrong with being a vegetarian? We got a weak brother over here.
There's nothing wrong with it as long as you don't try and impose it on somebody else.
Yeah, as long as it's not a religious thing that we're saying you can't do that because of, right. But what does he say about here? one who eats is not to regard contempt for the one who doesn't eat, right? Okay. For he uses this in 4 as a judgment. Okay. Now, let's go back to 7. Let's put some of this together. We're running out of time. I mean, you could use quite a few lessons on this, but I just want to just overview it. We've looked at some scriptures. We've seen that to say, judge not, lest you be judged, which is the normal way in which we use that, and we use that if we try to get out of actually looking at ourselves in the mirror. Okay, we don't want anybody telling us that we're wrong in anything, especially religious things. Okay, and so this is used, as I said, in the outward world, but it's used in the church a lot also. Because if you say something that they just don't believe, then you have, and it happens a lot. You study with people, and you'll say, well, you know, this is, and they'll say, well, you can't judge. It's even gone so far as some have written that these verses mean we need to get rid of our courts, because there's not to be any judging. Well, that's not what he said. That's not what John recorded for us in John 7:24. Said we can judge, but according to righteous judgment. For in the way you judge too, you'll be judged. How is it that we judge people? How is it that we judge people? I don't think there's any of us, and you can slap me upside the face when class is over if you disagree with me, but I don't think there's anybody in the world, I don't think there's any of us sitting here that has not judged another person by this, okay? And I'm not trying to be negative about it. I just think that, you know, I've done it, and I've done it many times, okay? And I think we do it sometimes unconsciously or subconsciously, right? But how do we judge? A lot of the time. Appearance is one.
Our own standards.
By own standards, another.
What we think is right.
Yeah, it's kind of like well, you murder, and yet you don't realize that you steal, maybe, and you think that it's a lesser. God looks at you as okay, but you're better because you don't. You know, I've been asked questions like, well, wouldn't God rather you than be a? And I said, no, because God don't want you to be the one. It's not a point of God rather than you being this type of a sinner rather than this type of a sinner. See, we don't. That's how we kind of judge our other people, you know. And I think we do that a lot of times just subconsciously. But appearance is another one. You know, didn't James talk about the rich coming in? And what do we do with the rich? What did he say? You do what with them? Yeah, you give them the best seat in the house. It's like they're somewhat superior. See, the greatest thing about Christianity is he sees us all as equal. We're not talking about, you know, all as equal as the world or America is concerned, because we're all supposed to be equal. We're not treated equal. But with with God, we're one with Christ. Okay, so we're all equal. So it doesn't matter if I own the whole world to God. It doesn't matter. I'm talking about in personal things, of course. It doesn't matter to God. Or if all I have is live in is a tent. See, those in Haiti that we've talked about off and on, many of them just live in a tent or a house that, I mean, you could almost blow down. You know, if 2 or 3 got together and blew real hard, you could blow down. Okay. And so when a storm like that comes, they lose everything. But to God, they're just as important as any of us sitting here. They're just as important as anybody in Washington. They're just as important as any rich people in Hollywood. We're all the same. Okay. But it's true. It's true. We tend to treat people differently. Okay. Now, I don't think we see it quite as much in the church as we do in the world, but I see it in the church. So it says, for in the way you judge, you'll be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. How are we going to be judged? What does that mean?
I think he points it out pretty clear in the example. He's saying that when he kills the guy, to get the plank out of his own eye, the log out of his own eyes. Go through the pain of doing that. Of getting this out of your eye. When you go to your brother to get the little speck out of his eye, you're gonna be really careful. You know how much the hurt is.
Yeah.
So you're gonna approach it completely different after you take your own out. And you would have to.
That's good. Good. I like that. Yeah. But we do that. You know, we do that, don't we? We don't realize. That's why I say I think we do a lot of this judging, if I can use that terminology, judging, but comparing maybe in many cases rather than judging. But we have this big log like this 2x4 in our eye, and we see somebody with a splinter in their eye, and we're ready to what? Tell them how they're wrong. He says, pull it out. Now, I want you to understand when he says to get the log out, he's not trying to tell us, get the log out so we can judge the person. What is he trying to tell us? What is he trying to tell us?
Worry about yourself before you start trying to judge other people. For one thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to judge with righteous judgment if you're not righteous.
And you can't see clearly. And that's kind of what Chuck was saying, you know. Pull it out so you can see clearly, and then you can do what? What is the golden rule? Yeah, it kind of goes along that way. So we don't want to misunderstand the scriptures here by saying, well, when you pull your log out, then you can see clearly how to chastise him. That's not what it's saying. Okay, that's not what it's saying. Okay.
I have a question, Eric. Yep. This may,
We don't have time, Jim.
oh, okay, well, you can answer.
No, go ahead.
For example, you take somebody such as Hillary or somebody like that, murdered and stole and all this here, and everybody has judged them as being bad people all the way through. Then, say for instance, tomorrow she decides to become a Christian and she is killed the day after. Is she still a person to be judged, or is she a person that is a Christian just like you? This has always bothered me. It might be the wrong place to ask this.
Well, no, because a lot of people,
Just sin.
Right.
And you said about murder and somebody stole something.
The thing about it is that when you say become a Christian, I have to assume that they heard, repented, they actually was repentant, and they actually was wanting to commit their lives to Christ, not someone that just did it. Okay, because we don't. That's up to God to look at the heart and decide Christian. But I have to assume that you're talking about someone who was heartfelt and did what was necessary to really become a Christian. Then those things are wiped away, and what I think doesn't matter. Okay, and if she dies the next day as a Christian, then that's still up to God. But the Bible tells us that we can assume that she's right with God at that point, you know. But if she lives 10 years and she's still doing the same thing, then definitely we have righteous judgment there that we can do. Does that answer your question or not?
Well, yeah, sort of, but what I was wondering is, you know, whenever somebody does something, we say, well, we don't have to worry about that. The Lord will take care of that person later on in life or at the end of their life or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I was wondering, is that they do become a Christian and all of their murdering and all of their stealing and everything's all been just totally wiped out. And then when we stand there at Judgment Day, they're the same as we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because the whole point of it is that verse 2 and 3 tells us is that we can't judge him according to us. We have to judge him righteously according to what God has said. And what God has said is, if you believe, Romans 10:17, because you've heard, and then you truly repent, okay, and you confess Jesus, and then you're baptized, then when you're raised up, you're a new creature. Yeah.
With this, we've got a biblical example of this in Paul. Paul murdered. Paul had a terrible reputation, and of course, later on, we it's not quite parallel because Paul lives on for a good length of time afterward. But even there at the beginning, you know, we see some of the uncertainty from other Christians in welcoming Paul back into the fold, if you will, or welcoming him into the fold. Words are hard. And so Barnabas steps in and as to say, no, he's a Christian. He's changed. All that stuff that he used to do, that's not a part of his life anymore. And even though it was difficult for them then, they were, you know, they were still to welcome him in. That's something that, you know, sure they had all this stuff in the back of their mind about what he had done, but that was his old life. Paul later himself will say, you know, that's that man of death. He's gone. It's not a part of that life. He's a new creature, new creation, they'll say in 2 Corinthians 5.
Well, yeah, but Paul, even before he became a Christian, thought he was doing it in order to please God. Whereas, using Hillary again as an example, she's not doing it to please God. She's not doing it for anything except to please herself. And I don't even see a good parallel there between her and what Paul done. Because Paul thought he was still doing it for the Lord, then he found out whenever he became a Christian that what he was doing for the Lord was wrong, for the wrong motives. And then after he became a Christian, he started doing everything for the Lord in the right motive and for the right reason. So I don't see a good analogy of that, because he wasn't totally corrupt in one sense of the word, whereas everybody is, I don't know if it's true that everybody is judging her as a totally corrupt type person, but I'd say probably 80% of the people that know anything about her judge her that way. And I know we're not supposed to judge, but it's real hard not to judge somebody that does something like that when you know a lot of the stuff that they have actually done.
Jim, I think part of the problem with that is we're looking, in particular, in this situation, you're looking at her sin worse than your sin. In God's eyes, murder is no worse than lying. It's no worse than knowing you're supposed to do something good and not doing it. It's all sin. It will all send you to hell. In God's eyes, murdering, stealing is no worse than the things that you and I did before we became Christians.
Well, the point is no matter what point you are, because there was all types of people in Acts 2, all right? And those that were baptized had their sins washed away. Didn't matter what they were before, and it doesn't matter what Hillary or Paul or anybody else, once they have sincerely, and only God knows, sincerely taken the prerequisites of hearing, believing, and ultimately obeying the gospel, they're Christians. Okay, we have no right to judge otherwise. Okay. I've been asked several times on Philippians 2nd chapter. And so we only got just, Trevor, can you take account, please? Only got just a couple minutes. But I just want to, I like to use Matthew 7 as kind of an answer to this. And whether you would want to use it for this or not is fine too. Notice as we read, it's be Christ-like, and as Christ has come down and he's willing to die for us, and he humbles himself and empties himself and comes down humbly. Notice though, as Paul begins here, okay, in verse 1, it says, therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, if there is any consolation of love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, any affection and compassion, he says, then make my joy complete by being of the same mind. Okay? Maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Okay? That's what Christ died for, is unity. Okay? Now, notice 3. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Now, I've been asked, how do you do that? What does that mean? Does that mean Donnie's better than me? I regard him as better than me? What does that mean?
Goes back to kind of the two greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your might, but the second is love your neighbor as yourself.
Exactly. But how would you use that in Matthew 7?
Well, again, before you go judging somebody, imagine if the roles were reversed, and how would you want people, judging you? You want to judge them just like you were judging yourself or judging your spouse or somebody that you love. I mean, we're all equal.
But he says, and you kind of alluded to it, and it's why I've thought about looking at Philippians 2, is that we're all what? We all have what? Sin. And to judge somebody else or merely looking on them as you're better than them is saying what?
You don't have sin, what you're saying.
You either don't have sin or you're regarding God as better. You're better than him because of a degree of sin. And so he's saying, I think, what Matthew 7, 2, and 3 is saying. Okay? Look at yourself in the mirror. Get that, work on that sin out of your own eye. It doesn't say you can't help a sinner, but he says what?
Take care of your sin first.
Yes. Take care of yourself.
Because you're not going to be able to help them if you've got sin in your life. They won't take you seriously, and they won't listen to you in your helping them.
Right. There's an attitude here that he's trying to express, I believe, in Philippians 2. Okay? It's the attitude of Christ. Because while we were what? He came. Sinners. He came. While we were sinners, he came. And so to regard others, to look down on others, he's saying, no. Take care of yourself, help others. Take care of yourself, help others. I think that's what he's talking about here, an attitude, just like Matthew 7 is talking about an attitude. Okay? We're not to judge. I'm not to judge Donnie based on me. Okay? If I don't like his shirt, that doesn't mean anything. Okay? I'm judging that because I just don't like his shirt, not on anything else. I like your shirt, by the way. Yeah. I'll talk to you about getting it from you after.
When you look at 1 through 5 altogether, it really points out how you can really wreck things by appointing yourself as judge over somebody else. And the way it reads, it's appointing yourself judge and sentencer.
Well, I want to turn to one more verse, and we're out of time, but nobody's standing at the door, so I still got a minute. 2 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter. 1 Thessalonians, 5th chapter. I want to look at 21 and 22. Now, notice what it says. But examine everything carefully and hold fast to that which is good. Abstain from every form of evil. If we would look at those continually in our lives, that's what faith is. Faith is something that says, this doesn't look that good. I don't think God would approve. It doesn't have anything to do with you approving. It has to do with, would God approve? And it's interesting to me because I was a young person once myself, but there are those who are wiser than I am. I'm to someone that's 85. I'm just a young cub. Doesn't have much sense, you know. When you're 12 to 15 years old, you think you know everything, you know, and then, you know, when you're 21, you don't think 12 to 15-year-olds has any sense, you know. So when you get to be 21, you think you know everything until you get 30, and then you don't think anybody 21 has any sense. That's just kind of the nature of the thing. Okay. But it's interesting when there are those in the church that would come to you and try to express a feeling. I'm not talking about judging, but express a feeling that something that you're doing in your life down the road could have a great effect on you, your spiritual life, your kids, or whatever. And what do you hear a lot? Judge not. You see, we don't understand that discerning what's good and what's not good is we always call it judging, and it's not always judging. I want us to remember that. He's not talking here not to go to someone and talk to them or not help someone. We read that already. All right. But this is a contemptuous, hurtful judging that he's talking about. Okay? That's what he's talking about. Anyway, thanks for your interaction. Are you using this?
How are you? Let's go here.